What's up, fellow Wastelander? I've been working on a Raider cosplay myself, and I decided to film part of it today using some scrap EVA foam. Today we're making an elbow pad. Stick around. Let's take a look at what we need for this project. Some scrap What the Foam, that stuff is rugged. A Leatherman multi-tool, an X-Acto, paintbrushes of various sizes, a sharpener, safety knife, you better be careful with that, sanding stick. You're also going to need an elastic strap, some greeblies, I can't remember what they're from, a hot glue gun, dual temperature I like, and hot glue sticks, make sure they're also dual temperature. Also, you're going to go ahead and borrow your girlfriend's heat gun. And we're going to pull out the Mod Podge too. Make sure it's matte. Then we've got 5 different colors of plaid paints through their Folk Art acrylic line. All of them are matte. All of them are perfect for the product that we're making here. Now I carved off a square of how much I think I'm going to use here, and then I'm just taking this knife and carefully making a score mark all the way around. And actually, you'll see here I almost treat it like styrene, where it just folds off and pops off of the cuts. And in a couple of spots I make multiple passes. I use the sharpener off camera to sharpen that knife, but I mean, this What the Foam is tough, it's dense. It could be used for, you know, really lightweight armor for like LARPing or something. Now, I use the sanding stick to just clean up the edges. The What the Foam really takes a nice edge, so using the emery board or the nail file, whatever you want to call it, that's what I did. So I cut this up off camera and just came to the shapes. I did a little bit of engraving with the X-Acto knife to make it make it stand out, give it a little more detail, some production value, just something to catch the eye. I started adding the little greeblies to different spots. I don't know what they are, what they're meant to represent. Like, I don't know, hardware, attachment hardware of some sort. It's the world of make-believe. It's from a video game. It's inspired by a video game. Who knows? And I'm just laying these pieces on and taking a look to see if I like where they are. I put a dab of glue where that little one is, and it, you know, it's gonna stick in once I punch a hole and pump the hot glue into that. So I make sure the gun's set to high. I get it set up, and you gotta be careful, don't burn yourself, but basically I put that glue in there, press that in, clean off the excess, and it stays right in place. Alright, right here I'm using my awl to punch a hole. I actually thought I was going to put it on backwards and use the pointy bit that you see there to stick through, but I didn't. So here I'm being careful with the heat gun. There's extra protection underneath this mat, and I'm heating up the What the Foam and molding it to the shape that I want. I want it to look like it's made out of maybe scrap metal, maybe, you know, some type of heavy material under leather before all the metal gets attached to it. So I've got to curve it and make sure that it stays in the shape that I want. And I'm sorry I did the curving off camera, but it's tough with a one camera setup doing this by myself, and I'm just trying to be careful. So here I've got a pretty good curve about where it should shape up against the back of my arm to protect the elbow, and I apply some hot glue to that bonus piece and glue it right on. Now I want it to look like this is kind of welded and fused together. Maybe it's adhesives or it is welding. Could be welding. But I just looked at some pictures of sloppy welds and called on my experience that I've had welding and working in other industries where I see welding, and just I've seen some terrible welds. So that's what I wanted, like kind of a quick and dirty, grimy, somebody put this together on a labor bench somewhere in the wasteland. And then it wasn't dirtied enough, damaged enough, so I grabbed my X-Acto and just added some extra scratches and digs. Now I'm using that awl to go ahead and just damage it a little bit more, poke some holes in it, add little pits, places where color can gather and recess. And you'll see I took that awl and punched some holes in there that I'm going to use for a little bit of threading later, just to add some interest, visual interest, something else to look at that shows you that this is made in a world where things are just held together by anything possible. Here I took Mod Podge and just go over it, get into every crevice and nook and cranny, and then once it dries, it has a nice matte finish to protect everything. I like to block my colors out, so here I'm using dry brushing with gunmetal silver to block out that metal plate. I went over it a few times, I got metal all over those rivets. Some of the color shown through, but again, it adds visual interest. It's, you know, what are these things? You don't know. It doesn't matter. It's make-believe. It's fun. I made sure I got the welds too. That's another thing I wanted to point out, because those are obviously metal. Now, I'm treating this thing like it's leather, even though I welded to it, but again, world of make-believe, you know? Who's gonna say that you can't? It's your costume. and it's from a video game. So, maybe I put the leather pieces of, rawhide on there after I attached it to a metal plate on my armor. Who knows? But you see, I'm just using the corner of that brush to go around the weld and clean up any of the paint from the dry brushing that got over the welding area. I'm happy with how I blocked out my silver. You can see there's a little bit of over brushing when I did my dry brush step, but now I'm using this brown, the darkest of the two browns, to lay down a base that I'm going to work off of going forward in these areas. And I'm getting close. I'm using the corner of that rectangular brush to get close enough to those welds where you aren't going to notice that there is a little bit of overage on that. And when we start adding the different layers of paint, you're not going to be able to tell. Make sure that you take the time to paint the edges of the project too. Remember that this is going to be photographed at different points and different angles, so you want to sell that edge as one whole thing. Now it's starting to look like something, and I remember as I was doing this, I kept thinking it's missing something, but I grabbed a little bit of that brown and just went in there and hit everything again to give it a little more depth and detail, got into all the cracks and crevices where I had done damage, into those two squares that are exposed, almost like maybe that's where the banding was originally supposed to go through. Now here I've got a piece of sponge and tore it off, and I'm going to use that to stipple some of this lighter brown. So I put a little bit in a paper towel and I just go in and dab it on there over and over and over again. And then I'm going to rub it at one point, and that's going to make an illusion of just depth of color, aging, and, in-world handling. It's Fallout, you're in the wasteland, it's a nuclear holocaust and a nuclear apocalypse, a barren landscape. So everything's going to have just a multitude of damage and colors and grossness. Here I'm pretty happy with the finish, but you can see I pick it up and I just dab at it gently, and I go back and forth and rub, and it creates that blended look. Layers, layers, layers. We're just layering on this paint. And I want to make sure that I get close to the weld to make the appearance of, pretty even wear. So here I'm just dabbing a little bit of, this is actually a cheat. I'm using some of the Black Magic Craft. Basically it's Mod Podge and black paint mix. Actually it's wrought iron in my case, but just dabbing a little bit of that on to give it a little bit of depth and mat up certain areas. And once I've laid it in here by the welds, I just use that sponge to rub it kind of like an eraser, and it smears it and gives it almost an airbrushed look. So I'm just tilting it in the light. You'll see me do that a lot in this. When I paint metallics, I always try and put things into a different light to see how they pick up on camera, how the light flashes off of it. And here again, I'm just laying it on near the weld, and I'm going in and rubbing it like a pencil eraser, and that makes almost like an airbrushed grime line. We're going to speed things up again. You're seeing me repeat a lot of the same process because that's what you do on these things. I get to take a little bit of time and focus on that because I'm working on a project. This whole thing only took me about an hour, so I'm starting to get happy with that. I like the way it looks. Now I'm going to go in with orange and add a little bit of rusting to the metal. Because again, like I've said multiple times, it's the wasteland, it's an apocalypse, things are not perfect, things are not great. So I just dab it on and kind of smear it. Dab it on, kind of smear it. And I'm not too finicky with using the precious bare part of the sponge. I actually went ahead and used where some of the brown paint was, and that mixed in, and that just made different hues of the orange. And that creates a more realistic blended look of rust and grime on there. And who knows what else, like, I don't know, super mutant blood or Cazador venom or just a million things could have gotten on there. And it's just all about layering. Sometimes I'll go over the same spot multiple times to build up drips and runs and just compiling rust. And if you don't know what rust looks like, or you don't like the way that I do mine, you want yours more rusty or less rusty, just Google image search rusted metal, old rusted metal, and you'll get all sorts of different patterns and ideas and different appearances of things. And that's what I wanted something neat. Now I'm taking some green. This is one of the things that I've learned with making organic stuff, is as much as there's industrial waste of browns and grays and reds and blacks and metallics, there's also green and blue hues throughout things. So I just went ahead and put a little green on there, smeared it around, and gave it some appearance. But I added a blade. You see that there. that extra blade, and then we're using the surprise ingredient that I didn't include in the beginning, and that's not Mod Podge, Rub and Buff, Silver Rub and Buff, which is a wax, and it's got metal powder in it, and the more you buff it, the shinier it gets. And here you see me slightly off camera, hitting all the edges and high points with the Rub and Buff to make it look like those are what's scraping against stuff and getting worn in the apocalypse, getting damaged. And I'm really happy with how that looks. So here I'm just marking the 2 areas where I'm going to go ahead and attach the elastic, and I'm taking my knife and I'm cutting up the What the Foam to create grooves, and I kind of use my fingernail to pick at it a little bit just to open them up, because when I apply the hot glue, I want it to soak into there and really grab. Remember how when I talk about spray painting things in my other videos, I call it giving teeth? Same principle here, except I'm not using any chemical material. Now, while that hot glue dries on the first strip, I decide to go ahead and thread some wire through here. Just using some red and white wire that I used my Leatherman to clip those short, and pulled it out of some old electronics. I'm using a little bit of hot glue. I wet my finger and I just press down on the hot glue, and that allows it to cure faster than if I just let it air dry. And that coating of hot glue over top of those wires keeps the wires from poking me in the arm when I put this cosplay on. Something I learned when I did my Darth Vader cosplay. If you go back and look at photographs of that, you'll see there's a lot of exposed wiring and stuff, because I wanted to portray his mechanical nature, because he is more machine than man. And I had wires jabbing me in the hand while I was at con. Well, I learned that if you apply some hot glue to the backs, nothing will bother you. So there it is, all wired up. I added the strap, and now we have ourselves a pretty damn sweet Wasteland elbow pad. I am happy with how this turned out. Alright, Wastelander, there it is. That is my Fallout-inspired elbow pad. You know, a little bit of creativity and a little bit of scrap foam, and I was able to bang this out in about an hour. So take those tips, make them yours, show me what you guys make, tag me in it on social media if you make something similar. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the Wasteland. Be well.